So a little bit about us. Go ahead, take it away.
My name is Caleb Janowski. I'm with Cornerstone Home Lending. I'm in Silverdale, Washington on the Kitsap Peninsula. I've been in the mortgage lending space for about 9 years now. One of my favorite parts about the mortgage lending space is the creative ways that we can help first-time home buyers or buyers of all stripes figure out a way to become a homeowner. It can be challenging on the finance side, and we understand that. And so we try to figure out creative solutions for you to help you become a home. And yeah, that's me.
And I'm Tyler Freeman. I'm a realtor licensed in Washington State. And I've been on different sides of the coin in the real estate industry. So I used to work with Caleb actually, and I had 6 years in the mortgage side of things. And I'm now a real estate broker for the last year and a quarter. And one of my favorite things about the industry is the profound positive impact that I can have on people's lives. And I enjoy doing things like backpacking, hiking, gardening, and that sort of thing, guitar. All right, off we go. Take it away.
So this is a truth or a myth. All right, the first one is all home buyers need a 20% down payment to buy a house. You guys can put in the chat whether you think that is true or whether you think that is not true. Natty, do you think that's true or not true?
I'm not sure. I think it's true, right?
Okay.
It is not true. It is not. You do not need a down payment at all, potentially. You can put 0% down with some down payment assistance programs. It's actually a common myth that a lot of people think is that you have to have at least 20% of the purchase price as a down payment in order to purchase a home, and you don't. There's a lot of different programs, specifically the Washington State Down Payment Assistance Program that is available for all sorts of different buyers to help them secure down payment for buying a house.
What do you know? Next one.
All right, I have to pay off all my student loans or I have to pay off all my credit cards before I can buy a house. What do you guys think that is? Owen, do you think that's true or do you think that's false?
I think it's false.
You are correct, sir. That is not true. There are a bunch of different ways that we look at student loans on the mortgage lending side of things. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are actually the two agencies that make up the rules for mortgage lending, and they have caveats for people who have student loans. It allows us to adjust the payments to make it fit into your debt to income ratio, which you see there, and it makes it a little bit easier to buy. And then the other thing too is if you have credit card debt and you're thinking that may be a hurdle and you have to pay that off before you buy a home, sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it's not. And in fact, as I was telling Tyler previously, if you pay off a credit card and close it out, like close out a credit card altogether, sometimes that can actually hurt your credit score when you end up going to buy a house. So the biggest thing there is whether you have student loans or whether you have credit cards, you're talking with the mortgage lender before you're making any big money moves prior to getting pre-approved to buy a house.
Okay, so what do you think about this one? My first home needs to be my forever home.
I think it's false. Like we can change home whenever we want.
Yes, and not just being able to change the home whenever you want, but in fact, if you try to go for your ultimate dream home as your first home, you might, as a result, you might end up waiting. Like most the average first-time home buyer, by the way, is aged 40 in the United States, and so that's a big reason why people not the only reason, but big reason why people are waiting that long. Because the average buyer stays in their home 7 to 11 years, and your first home is just a stepping stone to build equity for about 5 years by the time you recoup your costs and you can trade up. All right, what about this one? Last one. Spring and summer is the only good time to buy a house.
I
I
think
think
that's true.
it's true.
Okay, well, it depends. It's mostly a myth, but it really does, you're right, it kind of does depend. So let me explain. So first, spring does bring the most inventory, and maybe it depends on what you're looking for. So if you, let's say you're looking for a very niche type of property that is most likely to be listed in the spring, and when there's a lot more inventory to look for, maybe that's a good time for you. Or maybe like your lease is up in the spring. Well, you got to be looking by that point, right? But generally, actually, the spring, because there's more inventory, there's also more buyers who are ready to buy, which means you're going to be competing with other buyers. There's going to be potentially bidding wars that make the prices go up. And spring tends to be the highest price anyway. So when you buy in late fall or winter, it often means you're facing fewer competing buyers, and you're dealing with more motivated sellers and lower prices usually. Okay, so we might have touched on this a little bit, and let's see. So we touched on where you are now and where you're looking to buy. You said, both of you, I think, said looking to buy in Washington at some point, right?
Yes.
And then how soon? I think, Owen, you mentioned basically once you're finished with your graduate degree. And Nadi, what about you?
Around 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, around 2 years time.
And Nadi, what about you? How soon do you think you're looking to buy?
I think the latest approximation is like 5 years, but I
Okay.
would like to have, well, I think that there's a lot of chances and offers that I think that when the time comes, I'll have a great opportunity and then I grab it until it's like growing more, like 1 room, 2 rooms, 3 rooms, bigger, but the price is so much better.
Right. And then ultimately, what motivates you both? Like, what about Washington, or what about buying in general motivates you?
The city around and the conditions, like getting a better job, like living nearby there, so I could go to work easily.
Okay. And a little thought experiment here before we move on into the meat and potatoes of this webinar here. How would you define home? What does the word home mean to you? Is it a place? Is it a person? Is it a feeling? Is it something else?
A house.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a place. Yeah, that makes sense.
For me, it's more like a stability, and the stability means someone closer, like a house or is your home, like the stability you are around. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
thinking too much. And
That's great. It's awesome.
Yeah. And so I did that thought experiment myself. And in real estate, home can be more than just the physical space. It's a sanctuary of memories, emotions, relationships, a sense of belonging and identity, comfort, security, authenticity. Basically, it's a place where you feel safe and perhaps stable, a place where you feel like you belong and where you can express yourself and be yourself. And the reason why I bring this up is because, as you can imagine, when you do the home buying process, you're not just going to the grocery store to buy some celery. There's a deep amount of emotion and almost identity wrapped up in the home that you buy. And as a result, the home buying process can be a very emotional process. And that's why we're going to talk later about how to be resilient throughout that emotional process to navigate it well. Okay, so quick overview of the process. So first comes the pre-approval. Caleb's going to touch on that. Then the search and the showings. making offers and starting to do negotiations with the seller. The due diligence period, that's when we do inspections and other things. Financing, appraisal, and title. The final walkthrough, final approval and signing. Closing and the key transfer, that's when the keys are physically handed over from the seller to the buyer. And then the first months of living in your new home after closing.
All right, well, let's start talking about a pre-approval. So Owen, Nighty, what a pre-approval means is that you have met with a mortgage lender, and that's me in this case, and you have filled out an initial application online. And when I talk with a client that I first meet, I instruct them to go to my team's website. That's dayteamlending.com, and then I have them fill out a loan application. That loan application is required by every mortgage lender, and it tells the mortgage lender where you live, what your job is, if you have any money set aside for a purchase. And then there's a handful of other questions that are all associated with that application. Once it's submitted, at the very end, a credit report is pulled, and that is your initial loan application. That gives us enough information in order to request the documents that we would need to get you pre-approved. What a pre-approval means is that a lender has reviewed your credit, your income, your assets, okay, and verified that you can get an approval for a mortgage once you have an offer accepted. Okay. So once we've requested the documents that we need for a pre-approval, that would be things like pay stubs, W-2s, and bank statements, maybe tax returns if you're self-employed, a variety of other things in there. But all of those need to be reviewed and meet the criteria of a mortgage loan in order to get pre-approved. At that point, I'll meet with you and a client and go through what it looks like to pay for a mortgage and how you can afford a mortgage. Each individual purchase price that you may consider has different monthly payments associated with it. Okay. Once we've gone through that process, we then hand the baton back to Tyler, who gets to do a lot of the fun part.
Your part's fun too. Okay, so this is where I come in, the search and the showings. So now sometimes the order is a little bit different at the beginning. It could be that you first met with Caleb or another lender and started the process with them, that pre-approval process, and then Caleb that comes in and connects you to me to then begin the search and showings. And this is when we do a needs analysis to discuss what you're looking for. But sometimes I meet you first and then I connect you to Caleb and then he does a pre-approval. And either way, we discuss what you're looking for as far as, bed count, how much square footage, do you need a yard, location, that sort of thing. What's your non-negotiables, what you cannot not have. And then we set up an MLS search. And then you get to favorite the ones that you like the most, and we get to go conduct a showing, which is basically a tour of the property in person. And after those tours, we do a little debrief to discuss the pros and cons of those showings, of those properties that we got to tour. And sometimes your criteria that you started out with changes, it morphs, it molds as you go throughout the process of seeing what's on the market, actually going through homes. You might want more of a yard. You might want less of a yard. Things can change. And basically you refine that criteria and you continue the search. And then at some point you decide, you know what, actually this one that we just went through, I want to make an offer. Like this one we like a lot. And so at that point, the agent reviews comparables, which are effectively similar homes that should be priced around the same to determine whether the one you're looking at is at fair market value or if there's any negotiations that we can make. So we then discuss the market statistics and the strategy, our approach on how we're going to structure that offer to the seller, because sometimes the listing that you're looking at, the property, is maybe overpriced. And if it's in a seller's market or a buyer's market, that might influence how much leverage you have and what you can ask for or not ask for. Then the agent negotiates the seller to pay for the buyer agent commission, but which, by the way, is only ever paid through closing. So you never really have to pay for the buyer commission unless you actually close on something. And yeah, then you get reconnected with the lender to confirm whether the payment at the purchase price you're looking at still works for you, and obtain an updated pre-approval letter. And then we make that offer, which, by the way, is an offer is when you fill out and sign your portion of a real estate contract. And so that might have that's going to have your purchase price, your terms, like different contingencies, which are the conditions, basically, like I will buy this if the inspection comes back. I will buy this if title is clear, etc. And then the closing date itself, whether it's sooner or later, might be a negotiation term that might be more or less attractive to the seller. And there's some other ways you can add, tweak your offer and make it strong. Then if there's any counter offers that the seller says, you know what, I like that offer, but I want to change it this way, we might discuss whether that's acceptable to you, or maybe we're going to walk that's not acceptable. We'll just basically discuss the strategy. And at some point, all parties, both the seller and the buyer, will sign that contract for mutual agreement. And once you're under mutual agreement, this is called the due diligence period. This is the hurry up and wait of the mutual contract period. So this is where we send that mutual contract to everybody: seller, buyer, lender, escrow. And this is when you usually wire your earnest money to escrow within only a handful of days, because you want to show what earnest money is. It basically shows that you're serious. You are depositing several hundred, maybe say several $1,000s into a safe a trust account with escrow, usually, at least in Washington State. And that can basically, once it's in escrow, that cannot be released back to you unless you complete the purchase. And if you happen to back out for any reason, or not for any reason, for a reason that's not allowed in the contract that you put together, then you will actually lose that earnest money. So it's basically skin in the game. You're showing you're very serious for the seller. And then obviously, with all those contingencies that are those I will buy if, those are the ways you can back out safely and keep your earnest money. And then we'd schedule and attend those inspections, which may include the generalist inspection, just kind of a home inspection that it looks at everything kind of broadly, and then they'll point out if something needs to be looked at a little bit further by a specialist. Maybe they say that you need to look at the roof, get the roof looked at by an actual roofer specialist. So we might schedule that as well. And we'll address other contingencies during this time period, usually within a 10 to 15 day period from when you first sign. That might include, hey, maybe you wanted a survey. Maybe you wanted to do a feasibility study. Maybe you wanted to do a neighborhood review to see if the neighborhood actually works for you. So there's all kinds of different contingencies you can include or not to make your offer stronger or weaker. And then last is you complete a full application with the lender. Go ahead and take that, Caleb.
So once you've gone through the inspection period, that is really when the baton is handed back to the mortgage side of things. That is when you will meet back with me and my team, and we'll figure out your final monthly payment, your final interest rate that you'll have for the life of the loan, and that is when we make full application. You have a 5-day period from when your seller has accepted your offer to when you have to do that process with the lender. Once we've gone through that process, it's at that time we may ask for some additional documentation that we would need before you get submitted to see an underwriter. It's also at that time that we'll order the appraisal. The appraisal is verifying the value of the home through a different method called an appraisal. And what it is doing is an appraiser is going out to the property and they're looking at the condition of the home that you're buying, and they're trying to find recent transactions or sales that have closed that match with the home that you're buying. They'll give Tyler and myself and you a value for that home that matches the market conditions. You don't have any problems with that appraisal if it is higher or equals the purchase price that you are paying. But if the appraised value is lower than the purchase price that you've agreed to with the seller, that is when your appraisal contingency kicks back in, and you have the ability to back out of the contract if you would like to. You can also try and renegotiate with the seller at that time and say, I'm sorry, the home that I have agreed to buy from you is valued $10,000 less than we agreed upon, and we'll need to readjust our purchase price. Okay, so we are in line for underwriting. We have the appraisal going. This is also the time that you will get a title report. A title report basically is a long report that shows all of the purchase and sales of the home that you are buying. The job of the title report is to verify that all of those transactions took place in a legal manner, and all of the loans that were taken out for that property are accounted for. So when you purchase that home, all of the debts that are associated with that house are paid off at the time of closing.
And before, so kind of in this in-between stage, before closing though, the buyer has the right to walk through the property within 5 business days of closing to ensure that if there were any repairs, to make sure that those repairs were completed to your satisfaction, and to make sure that the property's clean and the seller's personal property is removed. Basically make sure that the house isn't falling down right before you buy.
All right, and now we've done our final walkthrough, and now we are off to final loan approval and signing your final documents. Before we do that, do we have any questions about the initial loan approval process, or the appraisal or the inspection, anything like that?
I'm okay.
Okay, great. All right, so we're gone through the initial process there. Then once you've gone to see an underwriter's job is they're the person who verifies that all of the documents that you've submitted meet the rules and guidelines of the home loan that you were trying to take out. More than likely, what will happen is an underwriter will look at your paperwork, and then they'll say, hey, I have a few more questions that I need answered. We'll reach back out to you. We'll get those questions answered. We'll send it back over to the underwriter, and she'll give us our final loan approval. Okay. So at that time, at that point, we'll send a big package of documents over to title and escrow, and then they'll reach out to you to schedule a signing appointment. That last signing appointment is when you sit down with a notary and you sign all the paperwork that eventually gets recorded and says that you are a homeowner. Okay? And that usually takes place one day before you own the home. All right. And then finally, you have got all of your paperwork signed. You have final loan approval. The appraisal went great. Everything is good there. The lender will then give title and escrow the permission to go down to the county courthouse and record the transaction. What title and escrow's job is to make sure that all parties are on the same page. And then once you now become a homeowner, title and escrow will then send the money to the seller after all the parties have been paid. And then Tyler gets to do the fun part.
Yeah, I get to go coordinate the transfer of keys. So get the keys from the seller or the listing agent, and then get to hand them off to you, the buyer, and we have a party basically. And then there's several things that tend to happen in those first few months after you close, and that includes, of course, moving in, but it also includes transferring the utilities. And now is when you can buy furniture. Caleb can touch on why you don't buy furniture until now, later. And but another thing you want to watch out for are fraudulent and sketchy looking mailers that some, I'd say that there's some that are legitimate, that are actual insurance products called mortgage protection insurance. Now that's different than PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. This is mortgage protection insurance, and it's kind of like a life insurance policy. And I've personally had mailers come in, and I've had clients who've got mailers that basically say, regarding your Cornerstone Home Lending loan, and it might even say the exact loan amount, because technically that's public knowledge. It was recorded on a deed, and then it says respond quickly or urgent or something like that. But if you look closely, down in the corner, it'll say a different company's name. But it makes it look like it's coming from Cornerstone. Long story short, just reach out directly to Caleb if you ever get something like that. Reach out directly to your lender as opposed to calling the number on that mailer, just to make sure. And then also, it's an unfortunate fact that many appliances and home systems tend to give out after many days of non-use, just sitting and no one occupying the property. And so a good way to prevent that, or at least mitigate that, is to get a 1-year home warranty, which will cover much of those kinks that you're working out in those first few months, and that's ordered prior to closing. And of course, you're going to make the place feel like home. Okay, so we were talking about how just the definition of home, that it's there can be a very deep emotional and even identity connection to this word home. And so it's, as a result, buying a home can be equal parts exciting and terrifying. But here's how you can be resilient and have kind of a low-key process as possible. Besides having somebody who can take care of you as well, but you got to take care of yourself. First, eat good food. This might sound trite, but eat good food, exercise, get enough sleep, do things that bring you joy, practice mindfulness. So here's a concrete example in real estate. It can be anxiety inducing to wait for the seller to respond to your offer, to see did they accept the offer. Don't neglect to eat. Don't neglect to sleep or exercise or do your normal joy-giving routines. And remember that all contract dates end at 9 p.m. so that we can sleep. So take care of yourself. The second thing is to take things one step at a time. Break down big processes, like even the one that we just talked about, the whole home buying process. Take that and break it down into teeny tiny steps instead of giving up or feeling like it's too overwhelming. Because it can feel overwhelming if you look at the whole thing. But instead of just like focusing on let's move into the house that we love as a big picture, break it down into smaller things, like the immediate goal of, let's call a lender to get started with the pre-approval process. Okay, next step. Let's narrow down our search criteria. Next step, let's make our first offer. And eventually you'll realize, whoa, we're at the finish line. And how did we get here? Accept change. This can be a hard one for most of us, but this industry, just the market in general, it shifts. Lots of things change, and even we change as we go through the process. Like I mentioned earlier, your initial criteria might change after your experience in the market. You might find that the precise, very specific thing you were looking for just doesn't exist in this market. Or maybe It does, but at a different price point that you're not willing to pay. So learn from experience, reframe them, acknowledge those negative feelings you might have, and instead focus on what you can control. So here's a real concrete example. Your unaccepted highest and best offer is not a failure, but it's something that you can learn from. It's information. So at this point, you could ask yourself, okay, is this the type of home that I must have such that I'm going to make the highest and best offer over and over and over and over again until I get that kind of home, which might be exhausting, but maybe it's worth it for you. Or are there any compromises that I can make to find a home that's lower in my budget, and as a result, I can have a little bit of wiggle room to even make a stronger offer than what it's actually asking for. And then the last one is to let go of perfect. Use the 80% rule, because it's incredibly rare to find a 100% perfect home on budget. So instead, aim for the 80% rule, which is an 80% fit with the ability to customize the rest. So concrete example, if you're waiting for a house that matches 100% of your criteria just before you even make an offer, you might be waiting for weeks, perhaps months, and you might grow exhausted. But what about if you found 80%, one that was an 80% there, but just needed a little bit of TLC? So you might even be able to get some concessions and be able to negotiate repairs and upgrades depending on the market. So just look, it's a good idea to let go of perfect and to focus on the 80% rule rather than trying to go for the 100% perfection.
Let's talk about what it means to buy now versus potentially buying in the future. Okay. Today's interest rates are right around 6.5%. So if you are buying, let's say, a $650,000 home, that mortgage payment, that principal and interest would be around $3,900. Mortgage insurance there would be about $98. Okay. I hear a lot from many clients, especially first-time home buyers, that they're going to wait for interest rates to be lower, so that way it makes the buying of the home more affordable. And sometimes that is the case, but sometimes it's not. And a big reason why is if mortgage interest rates move lower, oftentimes what you see is more buyers come into the market and try to become a home buyer. So in this example, what I'm showing you here is if you were to look at the 2027 Q4 purchase, this is a good example of if interest rates move down to 5.5%, you could see purchase prices climb up into that $680,000 range. You're still putting down a 5% down payment, but now your principal and interest is slightly lower than it was at 6.5%, around $36.81. Okay, and your mortgage insurance is actually more expensive because your loan amount is more expensive. If you look at the column of 2027 refinance, what you see there is that if you have already bought a home and you are paying down on that loan, when you go to refinance or lower your interest rate, you'll already be ahead of where you would be if you were to buy in a year. You'll have already made payments. You'll have seen your home value rise, and you'll see your mortgage payment not be $3,800, but be closer to $3,600. And that can go a long ways when you're on thin budgets. And here's another example of kind of what I'm talking about. If you are, let's say, pre-approved to buy a home and you have a budget of what you can qualify for, and it's around $4,300, okay? As interest rates go down, if they do go down, you can qualify for a larger home. Okay, let's say what you're pre-approved for is only $4,100. Well, at today's interest rates, a $4,100 pre-approval, you could buy a $650,000 house. Okay, but if interest rates go down, let's say to 6%, well, now you can buy a $690,000 house. And you can see there how lower interest rates impact and make buying a home more affordable. But again, that also means it's more affordable for more buyers. Okay, and you oftentimes will see more competition. Finally, one of the things that I like to reference a lot is where interest rates were in the past and where they're going. Okay. And you can see that throughout most of this century, since the year 2000, interest rates have really been around 6%. Even in the year of the 2010s, what we saw were interest rates around 4%. There were times in there where interest rates were a little bit lower, but for the most part, 6% tends to be where you see interest rates dating all the way back into the 70s. Where are interest rates going? As I note there, in 2027, the expectation is that interest rates will stay somewhere between 6 to 7.5%. And then by 2030, you expand that out somewhere between 5.5 to 7%. There is no meaningful prediction of interest rates moving significantly lower for a sustained period of time. All right, and Tyler has referenced it a few times here, but here's some things not to do before speaking with your mortgage lender if you're trying to buy a home. Number one, there's changing jobs. Sometimes a job switch can cause major problems if you're looking to get pre-approved. Now, Owen, you had said you're a student, and so for you, it's more along the lines of once you do get a job, that would then be the time that you can get pre-approved. And the good news is your student history, your history as a student can act as your job history. Okay. Another thing that you would look at is if you do change jobs, if you're in a different line of work, oftentimes changing jobs isn't prohibitive to becoming a homeowner, meaning that what we do is we look at all the different jobs that you've had over the course of the past 2 years, and we make sure that there aren't any significant gaps. Okay. A big one there is applying for new credit cards or taking out new debt. If you are trying to become a homeowner, taking out new debt is going to be a killer. It's going to prevent you from buying a house. And that last one there is a good one as well, is draining your emergency savings for a down payment. Oftentimes it is a good idea to keep some money in your pocket for a rainy day because when you do become a homeowner, there are more hidden expenses than you would think.
And so I thought this would be helpful to have an example scenario. This looks like a lot of information, but trust me, we'll get through this pretty quick. This is a real live example of a listing that's in Tacoma, Washington. It's currently $440,000, and it's a 2-bed, 1.75 bath, a little over 1,000 square feet. It's mostly updated, but look at that DOM, which is days on market. That's 55 days. So I'll tell you what that means in a bit. So the price has dropped twice, first by 12,000, then by 5 only. So it looks like they're slowing in terms of how often and how much they're dropping. And then if you look at comparables, what the appraisers look at too, just to see what else the same type of home is selling on the market, they average around 400,000. Okay, so then at this point, if this was the house that you liked, I would then take a look at the market that this house is in and see how it fares in comparison to the rest of the market. Well, in this particular market, it is definitely a seller's market. It's pretty hot. The days on market are pretty low, so they go pretty quickly. In other words, there's low inventory, which means that there's a lot of demand potentially for a small amount of supply, and a bunch of other factors that make it a seller's market. So how would we approach this? Well, we discuss the strengths and the weaknesses of the seller's position. So given that this seller has been on the market for 55 days and the average is 20, that tells you that, yeah, it might be a seller's market in general, but this particular listing is sitting on the market longer than everybody else because, number one, usually is because it's overpriced. And when you actually do the comparable search, you can see that everybody else is priced around 400,000. So they're like 40,000 over, or close to that. So if that's the case, then they have a pretty weak position, and that might position you as the buyer, depending on your budget, to be able to negotiate concessions, which are basically the seller paying for your closing costs, or maybe even get a lower purchase price. So we would discuss the market interpretation and application as we're doing here, and then choose a strategy that's based on what's most important to you. So what is that strategy? It comes down to two things: certainty and safety. Now, it can be a combination of those two things, but it's usually those two. Is it, I want to be certain that I can get this house. I want this house at all costs. Or is it, I want this house, but under certain conditions or contingencies. So a little bit of safety. It can be a mix of both. And then we'd request that updated pre-approval letter from your lender, like we talked about previously, and write up the purchase and sale contract, which is the offer, and then send that off to the listing agent. Any questions about that scenario? Okay.
No.
Any questions about the whole webinar? Any questions at all?
Nope.
Nadi?
No, I don't think exactly about any questions. Just I was wondering about the HOA because obviously it's a new country. I don't understand exactly how it works. I don't like exactly my understanding. I don't like the HOA because I want something more like free to do in my garden. No, but I don't know what is the condition because it seems more like in the suburbs, but I want closer to the city.
Caleb, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Not every community has HOAs, and each homeowners association is different. Yeah, if you're concerned about being able to have a garden, my guess is that most HOAs are going to be very comfortable with you having a garden. Okay. So yeah, I don't know that that would be a huge concern on my end.
It does depend. I have heard that, like in certain parts of the United States, like in the East Coast, sometimes HOAs are pretty strict and they require a certain square footage of lawn space. They might require certain plants, specific plants to be used. So if you like to have like a native plant garden or some other type of plants, then sometimes it is a restriction. But it really does depend on the HOA. Every single HOA is different. And yeah, and it's actually, there are benefits to having an HOA. It really depends on what's important to you, but there can be benefits to having an HOA, such as a private road that is maintained regularly, because everybody's pitching in to maintain this road. So you have a nice neighborhood because of this HOA. Maybe if you alone wouldn't be able to afford waterfront property, if you live in Washington State along Puget Sound and you have an HOA that has access to a beach, well, you've got community access. Everyone in that neighborhood can access the beach privately. That's kind of cool, even if you personally aren't living directly on the water. So there are some upsides to having an HOA, even as sometimes there can be some downsides. So that's your question.
Yeah, also I have this question. Like, for example, I was thinking about a house that it's from different materials, like concrete. I don't know how you call it, like to be more like secure and tall. But I know that the cost is high. But also, I don't know if you can buy a house. And then destroy the house and you have the permit to rebuild a house with these different materials that are more like resistant, or I don't know if that I know that 20% is like high cost, but then in long term it's cheaper.
What
I
is
don't know.
cheaper? 20% of what is cheaper?
Rebuild build this house with different materials, like more resistant. Not the wood, I mean more like a parking lot, like a building, like the parking lot, the different like iron and the cement. I don't know how you call it, like
Sure. I get what you're
these
saying. Yeah,
blocks. Yeah.
there's a variety of different materials to build houses. Building a home is very different than buying a house. You can get permits to rebuild homes, but depending on where you are purchasing in the state of Washington, it can be difficult or it can be easy. Generally speaking, if you're just looking to purchase a home, they're in the state of Washington. Most houses are built out of wood.
Yeah, that was my question. Like what is best, what is not, especially in Washington. I don't know the laws. I don't know what is better, what is not. But that's why I'm thinking more about looking what I'm looking for a home. What is the best or what is not. Especially
Great.
that I'm living right now in downtown Tacoma. I'm looking for something close because I love everything close, like to the
Yeah.
hospitals, to all the services, like close, and the education too.
Yeah.
But also, I want something like resistant,
Yeah,
and
I get what you're
also,
saying.
yeah, and also, I don't want like the tips around, and I think that the materials also is something concern, but
Sure.
mm-hmm,
Got it. Got it. That makes sense.
Any other questions?
yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you both, Owen and Nadi, for joining us. We hope you learned something. And if you're curious about your purchasing power, let us know. I'm curious. Also, Caleb, I'm curious how you consider this perspective. I think of the pre-approval process almost. You can treat it like an annual physical. Like going to the doctor. You're going to the financial doctor, if you will, just to see, like where do you stand? Can you buy now? And then also the similar to a doctor, they'll give you some steps on how you can take good care of yourself and improve your health. And Caleb would be able to do the same thing. He'd be able to take a look at your credit and your assets and your income and say, okay, well, if you're looking to buy that type of house, then you can do these steps to get there, I imagine. Wouldn't you say that, Caleb?
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly something I can help you with. My email address is on the screen there, and Tyler has it as well. If you wanna see if you're actually able to afford to buy a home, the first step would be contacting me, and we can work on getting you pre-approved.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and that's it. That's all for us. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much for
Thank
the
you very
class.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.